Hi. So in the last video we have seen structure of a React app, what contains inside source directory and what contains inside the public directory and what contains inside the node modules, right? So node modules was a place where we kept all our dependencies. Okay, so now you can see that my node modules is grayed out because in my git ignore file I have excluded node modules to get uploaded to my GitHub profile. Okay, because why we do it, because node module contains like thousands of packages and you don't want them to go and increase the size of your overall repository, because it will be harder to clone and harder to push, right? And another thing is, like in my package.json I have all my dependencies, and in my package log.json I have my exact version logged inside this file, so I can regenerate my node module packages. That's the thing. So in my app.js I have removed all the boilerplate that react create app create react app gives us, and now you can see all I have is hello world, right? So what I want to, so the purpose of this video is to explain you what is the difference between JavaScript XML and HTML, right? Because it looks very similar. You can see that div is, like, it says that it is HTML, and we have class name. Okay, so I'll talk about the difference we have. But the first of the many differences we have is class name. Okay, you can see in my HTML you don't see class name anywhere, you see class in HTML. And the reason why we have class name in my JSX is because I have a keyword in JavaScript which is class. Okay, so I cannot use class here because class represents a class where I can have multiple objects derived from the class. So that's why we don't use class here, we use class name. Except that you can see that it looks very much exact, like I can say 99.99% similar to HTML, but it behaves differently. Alright, so another difference would be I can use a variable inside my JSX. And how can I do that? Let's say I have a, okay, let me first create a some markup. Let me just create some markup. The first one will be, I want to create an input which should be a type of text, and then what I want a button which should say like click me. Okay, the size is pretty small, so let me increase the size. Okay, so that you guys can see. Okay, so I have an input box and I have a button called click me. Okay, now let's say I somehow want, because this will be the structure when you are working with HTML, right? And in the app.css you can target this app with this class name. Okay, so in my app.css I can simply use dot, like I do with HTML and CSS in the normal markup. And let's say I want to give, what I can give, right, display flex and flex direction column. You can see it works. Okay, so I'll remove it because I don't want it to that way, but I can use align item center, align item center, align item center and justify content center. So now I can see it is centered in the horizontal way. And the reason why it's not centered in the middle, this is not the part of the React course, but we can do it. It's because my app does not have a height. Okay, so the height for my app is, you can see if I give it a background color of let's say 000, you can see that's the height. Okay, so if you want to use that align item property, you will have to give it a height, right? But we are not going to get deep into it because otherwise it's a deep hole. So I'll make a series on CSS flexbox and CSS grid as well. Alright, so I can see that I have input box, which and you can also give it a placeholder just like we do it in HTML, so it's very much similar. Okay, so enter your username, right? And in this place, since the concept of React is reusability, so what we can do is we can use some kind of variable. It's button text. Okay, so you can give it whatever you want, and the button text should be a string, right? And the string you can give it is submit, let's say submit, right? And here comes the main difference between JSX and HTML is that you can use variables, like I told you, like in JSX you can actually insert variables, right? Button text. But see, that's not the way I can do it. This will just simply print button text onto the screen, or this will give my button a text of button text. That's not what I want. I want this to be a JavaScript object or JavaScript variable. Okay, so I'll have to wrap it inside these braces. Now if I hit save, you can see that it has a button of a text of submit. Or the other way, you can say that text function. Let us call it text function, because I want to show you how you can use a function for the same thing. So this will simply return a string which will be, oh, this is basically these are called template literals. So sorry, I shouldn't use function, right? And inside now I don't want to use button text. I'll use my text function, but I'll also have to invoke it, which means I'll have to run it just to. I can see I have a button of a text of submit, so I can replace with this click here, right? So that works. Okay, so let me just first remove it because it does not look good, and I'll use button text. And the reason why we use variables inside JSX is to make it reusable. Okay, let's say I have button at I have my button component at multiple places in my React app, so I don't want it to print the same text again and again. So what I'll do, I'll generalize it. Okay, so this button text will be taking something, we call it in React is prop. So this will accept a prop as text and simply render the text. Okay, so another difference between JSX and HTML would be to use style attribute. Okay, so the way we use inline styling in HTML is like this. So we use background color, and let's say I want to give a background color of yellow, right? Yes, so let's say I want to give a background color of yellow, and also okay, let's say I want to give it a background color of yellow, but this will not work in my in my JSX, because it says the error on my console says the style prop exacts a mapping from style properties to values, not a string, for example. So that's example how we use style attribute in our JSX. Okay, so given the example, it says margin, right, where it does not have any hyphen like we have in HTML. It has a camel case type of string. So one thing we can replace is that not using background hyphen color, but using background color with a capital C, right? And another thing that they have wrapped it inside these two curly braces, right? And the reason why they have wrapped it inside two curly braces. Okay, so now you can see that my background, and it does not expects a string, it expects a what we call it a value, a key value pair, right? Now if I hit save, you can see my background color as now a key and the yellow is property, and the style has been applied to my app, to my button, right? So this was the first thing, that the difference is at first we have to use these curly braces. And now you might be thinking like, okay, one curly braces was fine, because that's how we use JavaScript variables or JavaScript constants inside our JSX. But why two variables? Okay, so the reason why we are using two variables, it's very simple, is because let's say I want to create a constant, we'll call it as button style. Okay, and I simply take this out and I paste it here. Okay, so now my button style is an object which has a key of background color and a value of yellow, right? And now I can use, just like I use it here, I can use my button style and it will work flawlessly. So you can see the difference was that the first curly brace was to represent that we are using a JavaScript variable, and the inner curly braces were to represent that we are using something called as objects. Okay, so button style is an object in JavaScript, right, which has a key value pair of a pair type of syntax. Okay, so this is the another thing that we have in React. Now to use, like, how to use multiple values in our style object is by simply using, now imagine this like an object, which is, I mean, this is an object. So how do you insert in an object? Okay, so simply you put a comma, which means that now I'm giving another key, and now let's say I want to give padding, right? And the padding should be, let's say, the first I want to, the top and bottom should be 1 pixels, and then the left and right should be 5 pixels. So did it, let's say if I give 10, okay, so it is working, right? So I'll give 2 pixels and 5 pixels, right? And also I don't like the border which is around my submit button. So what I'll say, I'll simply border should be none, let's say. Oh sorry, none should be a string. Okay, so everything which is in the right side of my object should be a string, other except you are giving some values, in the case where you are giving some numbers, right? Now I can see that it has no border. Okay, let me just do one thing. I'll give a border of 1 pixel solid black. Okay, and also yes, I'm just playing around with it. So cursor should be a pointer. I can see that I have this hand icon. All right, so yeah, and now see, what do we conclude from this video? Okay, so now you understood like the difference between HTML and JSX. And if you remember the slide that I showed you where I talked about 4 building blocks of React, so I've talked about JSX, right? What a JSX is. Now what a component is, see, this is app.js is a component, right? So my app.jsx is basically a function, right, which returns a JSX. Simple. Okay, so this is a function which returns a JSX, and this is JSX. See, that's how things connect.